Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Future Adelaide and advertiser.com.au. Chat live with Nick Reade, who's the Chief Executive of BankSA and the State General Manager, Westpac, South Australia, and Northern Territory and WA.
Hi, Chris.
We have with us as well Jacqui McGill, who's, of course, very well known as the former asset president of BHP's Olympic Dam. She's left that, but she's still got plenty on the plate. She's chairman of TAFE SA. She's a member of the Premier's Economic Advisory Council. She's on the RAA, the Art Gallery, and in her spare time, she runs her own consultancy. Then we've got Ollie Brown, who's director of the Big Easy Group, which is a leading entertainment and hospitality group in the state. They run the Stag, Nola Adelaide, Anchovy Bandit, and Yusu George, if I've pronounced that correctly. And Ollie studied wine at the University of Adelaide, so he's definitely got the credentials to be in that. So thanks very much for being with us. Now it's a bit of a discussion and a chat, so nice and informal, and we'll get it rolling. So what we wanted to do is look at South Australia's economy, particularly coming out of the coronavirus restrictions and how we look at bouncing back. So maybe start off with Nick. You spent a lot of time looking at charts and analysing things and talking to business owners and things. So, you know, one of the big questions is really how you see us coming out of this, how long it'll take, and whether it'll be either a sharp bounce back, or are we going to sort of bumble along the bottom for a bit?
Yeah, good question, Chris. I think it's going to take a while to get through. Clearly, we had some numbers this week, actually. Economic growth in Australia was negative 0.3, which is actually a little bit better than some people were thinking. Obviously, that March quarter was probably before the key sort of period, which would have negatively impacted our economy, but would have also had bushfire impact in it. So we've had a few cumulative negative headwinds, if you like, impacting the economy. But 0.3 negative wasn't too bad. But we're about to go into what will be the June quarter, and everyone's forecast there is for a steep decline. Our current forecasts are around negative 8.5%. So that's a big drop. I think.
So is that for the state or for the country?
That's for the country, yeah. The state, we don't have any sort of specific numbers, but it'll be possibly a fraction worse than that, I would expect, based on historical trends between the Australian numbers and the local numbers. So we could be heading towards even a double-digit drop in South Australia. But you know, the good news is after that, we expect the third quarter to be back to around flat, maybe slightly positive. And the final quarter for the year in December probably will be around 4 to 5% growth, so positive. So I think we're going to go through a rough period in terms of the next 3 to 6 months, and hopefully we spark back into some growth in the fourth quarter. And what economists say is it a V-shaped recovery or is it a U-shaped recovery? I mean, who knows exactly? Yeah. But I think the bets are on probably more U than V, as in sharp recovery we all love to see, but I think it's probably at least likely that it might be a little bit slower, so more like a slight U shape, so slightly flatter. That's i.e. that third quarter being sort of just flat to slightly positive, so which is sort of almost a base, and then before we recover. Yeah. So that's roughly what we're looking like. I guess the good news is Australia's in a good place. We've had some great involvement from government. And, you know, we look at the numbers coming out of the US and UK and Europe, we're in a much stronger position. So there is a bit of a silver lining there.
Yeah, definitely one of the best places in the world to be, I think, South Australia in That's particular.
Right. Definitely.
And Jacqui, yeah, so I mean, there is we've been through this period of doom and gloom at the moment, but there are green shoots emerging. What do you see as some of the strengths that are coming up?
Well, I think what was really encouraging through the pandemic response was that the resource sector really continued to fire and operate, which was excellent for income for Australia and more broadly, particularly in the regions, to see the jobs continuing to be supported there through the resource sector. I think the building and construction sector also fired along. they were able to adopt their practices and ensure that they maintain the building activity. I think what's important now is to continue to look for the pipeline of both resources projects and construction projects to keep those sectors firing. And I think a lot of the announcements that the government's made, both on a regional and in metropolitan South Australia, I think are really encouraging. And it will be important that we see that investment continue to flow to keep those two key sectors going.
Okay. Now, you've obviously got a lot of interest in the resource sector. That they did keep going, but they did have to pull back on exploration and cut back a certain amount and change some of the staffing systems and so on. Do you think that they will be able to not only continue but go through a period of growth? Well, you've got some good prices happening in iron ore, for example.
We do. It'll be important that those pricing are sustained, which will be interesting to see how the potential slowdown on the global scale goes. I mean, the IMF are not being particularly positive when it comes to the global economic outlook, and those global settings are important for how the resource sector performs. All of the sector has responded with changes to how they operate. That, of course, has increased cost. So that is of a concern to many of the producers, but they'll be looking at ways, to innovate and ensure that they can maintain the good health practices whilst, recovering their operating cost performance. So,
yeah, people too often, I think of mining as or resources generally as sort of old-fashioned industry, sort of heavy labour, but in fact, it is a crucible of innovation, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's been exciting to see how potentially those changes that they've initiated and implemented with more remote working and working from home will be supported and could potentially have a positive benefit for particularly regional communities, which we know suffer the most through economic downturns. So it's important that, those agile working practices, working from home, etc., they really do open the door for future opportunities for people living in remote regions.
And Ollie, certainly the hospitality industry looks like it might be one of the first ones recovering. You've got gradually, I think you're up to 80 people at a venue in South Australia now, as long as they're in groups of no more than 20 in any one spot. But I think you're looking at a good order book for the weekend and then hopefully beyond.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a pretty interesting one with the introduction of kind of social distancing. The hospitality model's sort of broken. It doesn't really work fitting so few people into venues. But we have seen a really, really great return to dining this week with SA opening up capacities to 20 people per room and 80 per venue. So a lot of our venues actually booked out this weekend and people seem really keen and eager to get back. So some really promising signs.
And will the menus be kind of normal menu, or there kind of be a bit of change in that? Because I think you've got some restrictions on like sharing platters and that sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure. I think it'll depend on the operator and the business and exactly what they're trying to do. We're doing our absolute best to kind of stick to guidelines and make sure it's sort of safe for people to go out and dine and there's a proper distancing in between tables. But I think that the more savvy operators would focus on local as they can and probably limited menus just in case anything does happen or change in the not too distant future.
And is it worth spending the marketing dollar? Because people are pent up and they want to get out there, but probably a bit of marketing might help.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you kind of look back in history and when people spend marketing, especially during sort of recessions, it's one of the first things to have spending cut, but it's probably your cheapest time to get in front of eyeballs. So I would probably say spend a little bit more on marketing, but it's a pretty challenging time, I guess.
Okay, and those are some of the ones that are recovering. But Nick, I imagine there are some of your customers are telling you that they expect that it is going to be a challenging time. I don't know, maybe some of them might be mixed. So.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, retail, for example, is one that we're all watching very closely, and retailers are telling us that right now it's a very challenging period. I think the numbers were out in the last couple of days on retail sales at negative 17% across Australia and negative 14% for South Australia. So it gives you a sense of the impact that they've been feeling. So I think in terms of both ones that may have a slightly longer period of recovery, I think retail, but equally if that starts to turn, if we see those numbers improve in the short term, that would definitely be a signal for perhaps upside on our growth numbers, economic growth numbers more broadly. I think tourism as well, with some at least uncertainty around travel arrangements, they're also under the pump, and for obvious reasons, it's a really challenging period, and certainly have I think we're all have a lot of sympathy for the tourism operators who also in South Australia went through a tough Christmas and New Year period as well. So Kangaroo Island, for example,
with the bushfires,
had a double whammy of fires and now COVID. So it was it's a cumulative effect, as I mentioned earlier, which is hard to fathom for many. I just know that many are very resilient, and they're getting support from the government. They're getting support from banks broadly. Everyone's trying to help and do the best we can to see some of these industries through. Equally, there will be some that just won't make it, unfortunately, as it is. But I do think that the majority will, but it's going to be a bumpy ride as we go through.
What about manufacturing? That seems to be sort of a bit of a mixed picture. I mean, you've got the dollar's stayed low, and you're going to get probably there seems to be a big drive for Australian-made local sovereignty, sovereign capability, and that sort of thing. So you might get a lot of imports substitution at least, but there's probably still quite considerable disruption to the supply chains and so on. So how do you think manufacturing will go?
The big point is what you just raised, the supply chain. I think that's been drastically impacted, but it's in the spectrum of things, manufacturing is probably sort of somewhere in the middle. I do think there's some opportunities that will come out of this for manufacturing, but just for South Australia more broadly, I do think there are. If we think about it, many have been working from home. Many corporates are thinking about bringing some of their offshore operations back onshore. I think South Australia is well placed to pick up business from that. I think we'll have less interstate migration going away. There's a number of drivers, I think, which may, if we look at the glass half full view, start to look a bit better for us. So, I know that the Premier and the government are looking at coming out of this stronger than before, and I do see many opportunities for us to look at it positively. It's an unfortunate situation we're in, but there are some opportunities that we need to grasp. And I think our position coming out of this stronger from even against other states should mean we can hopefully accelerate quicker on the recovery side.
And what about agriculture? BankSA has got a very strong regional presence. So I imagine you've got a lot of customers who are farmers and so on. And the start of the season looks like it's reasonable in terms of rains and so on.
Our agri customers, it's always a challenge that some have been impacted by drought and bushfires and other things, but some of the China sort of stuff that's been going on as well. But generally speaking, pretty good. It's a bit patchy region by region, whether it's comparing the southeast to the Spencer Gulf area to the Eyre Peninsula. It's all a little bit different, but overall, not too bad, I'd have to say.
Oh, that's pleasing. Yeah, and Ollie, a number of businesses have had to kind of pivot the way they operate. And I think you guys at the Big Easy Group did that yourselves when you couldn't get customers in the door. I think you started thinking about doing things differently. So, sort of packaging up wine deliveries and that sort of thing. So, do you think that's important to try and think outside the square a bit?
Yeah, most definitely. I think all kind of challenges sort of force innovation. We actually launched Big Easy Drinks before we had to close down all the venues on, I think that was Monday the 23rd. So we saw the drop down in trade already. So we were working towards a way to continue to support our staff and support our producers before any of the JobKeeper was announced. So I think I think these challenges will force a lot of innovation. I think you can't really just sit back and rely on handouts and government help. I think you need to kind of go out there and do what you can for yourself as well.
And I guess you talk to a lot of people, both of your mates, but also, people coming through the venues and things. Are they giving you sort of good ideas about that sort of thing?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, the last couple of months haven't been too great for people coming through the venues, but we've had a lot of people reaching out and contacting us and talking to us. We've actually had probably the most of that in the kind of suburban areas. We have a site out in Prospect, Anchovy Bandit, and just a show of community support was super positive. So, from people dropping off bottles of wine to paying a little bit extra, to tipping our delivery drivers. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of community support, and I think people just want to see everyone come out the other side of it.
And do you talk to other venue managers and owners and things, because one of the strengths of South Australia has always been a bit of collaboration, even if you're competitors.
Yeah, most definitely. There was a huge show of community support within the industry, and especially the small bar industry is quite tight. So I spoke to operators almost every day from other venues. People were just checking in to see how people were going, and I think that kind of looking after each other made it all that little bit easier. When you're forced to close, it's a bit of a tough situation. You don't really know how to take it. So we had an amazing community, a lot of really good operators looking after each other.
And what's the position with staffing and that? Because obviously, hospitality, a lot of casual workers, but also, maybe permanent part-times and all that. And I think, when you were closed, obviously, had to let people go for a while. Do you think, have they found other things, or are they going to be coming back as soon as you want them?
Yeah, I mean, the position's pretty horrible for staff, and especially in hospitality. So we had, I think about just over 70 employees on Sunday, and we went down to 0 employees on Monday. And there wasn't exactly like there was other venues that they could go and find work in. So with our group, we've done our best to keep in contact with people, but there's sort of no light at the end of the tunnel for casual workers. JobKeeper really propped us up. Once that was announced, we brought back 17 full-time staff. I think it was about 14 full-time, and then 3 or 4 casual about that. That came back on the books, and then we were able to use them to sort of develop the Big Easy Drinks platform, as well as do some kind of maintenance and bits around the venues. But yeah, if JobKeeper didn't come in, we would probably still have owners working for free until we could open the venues again. So I think that was super important to keep employers connected with employees. But as far as casual shifts going, I think it's going to be tough for the next sort of 6 to 12 months.
And the JobKeeper, I think at the moment it's due to end in September, isn't it? So is that going to be long enough, do you think, or do you think there's going to be pressure on to extend it?
Definitely. I think they probably need to extend it sector by sector or business by business. I understand that you can't keep paying everyone's wages in the country forever, and it's a huge bill. But I think sectors like hospitality need that support. It's such a high labour industry. You're doing well if you run 35% of revenue on staff costs. So if you're limiting numbers to 20 people in a 60-person venue, and Anchovy's case, it's 17 people in a 60-person venue, the model just doesn't add up unless you're getting that assistance.
But yeah, so it's going to be a long road back.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's going to be a long, tough road back. And yeah, we're definitely looking at survival as opposed to recovery at the moment.
Yeah, not many new ones opening up, but I suppose some venues might close and somebody else will come in and with a different idea.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny you said not new ones. We've actually just started working on a new venue, so there's some positivity for you. I think we'll see the other end of this soon, and it's probably a good time to employ people to fit out a venue and start something new, and a lot of community support. So I think there's some confidence there, and this weekend's bookings have just shown how keen people are to get out. So I'm feeling confident about it, but it'll just be the next couple of months to get through.
It's not just JobKeeper is a big question, Chris. I think it's not just that. Obviously, it's a combination of government support and restrictions easing. It's going to be the formula that helps businesses like Ollie's. If restrictions ease, well, things will be a bit easier to manage without the support of government. So it's a real sort of a double-edged thing there, where we've got to look at both support and hopefully maintaining as much support as possible. But it's been amazing so far, and restrictions and trying to see where those two things line up.
Yeah, I think Police Commissioner Grant Stevens has said a number of times that it was easy putting up the barriers in the first place, but trying to work out how to get out of there again is going to be pretty sort of messy, tricky business to get right.
I don't envy his job, no.
And on that one, Nick, I was just going to say WA's announced they're going to do 2 square metres per person in venue. That's already looking at a sustainable, or at least a break-even point for venues. So even 2 square metres, I think people would be able to start paying their staff again. They won't be looking at profits, but I think they'll be able to sustain the workforce or their staff. So that would even be a huge advantage for venues.
Mm. And all of it, of course, relies on everyone doing the right thing, right? Mm-hmm. So when you do go to the venues, practice good hygiene practices and social distancing, because what we do need to be concerned about, I think, as a community is the potential second wave. And it really does rely so that the society can keep moving and get back to normal as people do the right thing.
I think at the art gallery, I think you were saying that the people coming in have to fill in a declaration or put in contact details and so on.
Yeah, we have to be. I mean, the gallery is really busting to start. They're ready to go and they're looking forward to welcoming patrons back. The North Terrace is a great venue for our communities to enjoy the culture that is South Australia. And they'll be adopting the processes required by SA Health, which will include obtaining everyone's personal information in case there is a need to do contact tracing. But the biennial event has been extended, which is a fabulous exhibition. It's monsters. So, 2020 has proven to be pretty scary. So there's nothing like a bit of art in the same vein to prompt people to, re-engage with culture in South Australia. So the gallery is really looking forward to welcoming people back. They will have limits on the number of people, just like the other venues, and ensure that they can maintain the social distancing.
Will people have to say whether they've got the COVID Safe app downloaded or anything?
No, I don't know the exact details. What Rana, the director, was telling me was that they will have to capture people's contact details on entry and limit the number of entries into the gallery. But they've, stepped up as required, and they're very excited. A gallery is a lonely place with no one in it. So they're looking forward to welcoming the community back.
Okay, and talking about sort of policies coming back, are there both for in your consultancy business? I guess you're talking to business owners, Jacqui, a lot. Are there sort of policies that businesses should be adopting that are maybe different from what they've done before?
I think, right now, as Ollie mentioned, for most people, it's about survival and ensuring that they're able to be as agile as possible in responding to how the pandemic's potentially impacted them. As I mentioned, the resource sector, relatively unscathed, if impacted particularly by, higher operating costs. But I think in addition to that, we're seeing, the pipeline of projects slowing. I think you see people who may have intended to expend capital to a certain timetable have slowed. So a lot of the engineering organisations in South Australia are really seeing that pipeline shrink. So with increased confidence will come increased spend of capital. And I think what's important is that certainly from a policy settings perspective, Chris, is that the federal government and state government, as it is doing, is looking to how they can improve regulation and streamlining their services to support the fruition of those projects. So we had the South Australian Infrastructure Plan released. I think that's a great platform for which South Australia can continue to invest, and it has a good focus on regions as well. So we need to see large scale as well as small scale activity pick up, and everyone is looking to that sort of certainty and the removal of restrictions in order for them to pace their spend. The resource community was impacted significantly with the reduction in FIFO that was actually able to be maintained because they draw on specialist labour from across Australia. So as these travel restrictions ease, that will improve their planned project activity, which is important for the state.
Mm. And now's a good time to borrow, isn't it, for infrastructure projects or for any projects, any investing with rates staying low? So I don't know if that's a question for the banker or for the consultant.
Well, yeah, I mean, official rates at record lows, and certainly, whether it be larger infrastructure projects or even home loans, it's definitely a good time, best time I've seen in my 30 years to be borrowing money. But obviously, you need to consider that over the longer term. But we can't see rates moving back up anytime soon, Chris. So yes, it is a good time. But equally, it's important that banks like BankSA are also supporting customers through these times, and we've got a significant number of customers on loan deferrals, whether they be businesses or households. So that's really important, and the industry has worked together with the government on that. So it's been a collective effort, but has played a role amongst others in getting through this.
Mm. What about credit card rates and things? Your mortgage rates are, probably about as low as you could possibly go. But,
yeah, credit card rates are higher. The reason for that is they're an unsecured product, and in times like we're in, unfortunately, some customers are unable to pay us back, and that's just the nature of that type of product. When we look at pricing, we look at a portfolio of pricing for customers. Have very, very good home loan rates. Credit card rates are a bit higher, so it sort of balances out. But also we look at it over a time frame. So when times are good, that's fine. But when times are bad, unfortunately, impairments, if you see the forecast of the banks at the moment, their impairments or essentially credit losses forecasts have gone up dramatically. So that's one of the outcomes of recessions, unfortunately, is bad debts tend to escalate dramatically, and credit card losses will go up dramatically. So that's why credit card rates are a bit higher than other rates like home loans, which are secured by the property.
Mm. What about, I don't know if you had time to really digest it yet, but the announcement yesterday about the building and renovation, the 25 grand, do you think, $150,000 renovations is in South Australia, that's quite a big deal. Do you think?
Yeah, that's right. I have to, hats off to government for keep coming up with new stimulus type ideas. So highly encourage that to keep going. I think many commentators have sort of given it a tick in terms of that type of good intent. I guess. It's an expensive renovation. Some of the hurdles, whether it be the income thresholds or the starting point of 150,000, probably has a little bit of concern in there. I think it was meant to be more around greater building and new building, but the renovation component has probably got more attention than it was intended to do. But so I do think it's a tick for the intent and the idea. I think the devil's in the detail a little bit, and for markets like South Australia, I think, and some of the restrictions around the thresholds and the minimum entry point, probably going to have some challenges with that. But still, I guess we whether it be the federal government or state government, we keep coming up with ideas to try and make things better, which I think is a good thing.
Mm. Yeah, well, the state government's sort of looked at the other end with the rental assistance that announced today. That's a fairly sizable amount of $1,000, and perhaps about 10,000 people helped that way. So
yeah, that's a good thing. I haven't seen all the detail, but I saw a quick snippet of it this morning, which sounded like a good idea.
I think the other thing that deserves some acknowledgement is the South Australian Government's plan for the maintenance program on public housing. I think that's an excellent initiative, you know, so, and that includes the regions, which is fantastic to see that we're considering our regional communities through this, and that will really encourage local building, local construction, local services to pick up too. So an excellent initiative from my perspective.
Yeah, I really feel like we've got a great opportunity for a construction-led recovery in South Australia specifically. I think that's where the federal government were going, but without that, you know, certainly been, you know, my 2 cents is really around a real focus of doubling down on what we can do to support construction in South Australia will go a long way to getting us, you know, on the road to recovery faster. So we need to look at, you know, extra stimulus, extra help around those sorts of things. So I'm all for that. I know there's certainly the broader industry, construction industry, would love that too, and for obvious reasons. But I do think it's a key to us getting out of this quicker if we focus on that type of thing. We can't do everything, but what can we do? I think focusing on that industry in particular, in perhaps a slightly different way to the federal package, a more local version of that, in addition to the federal one, a little bit like we've done our state versions of federal support, I think is probably one thing we should be looking at.
And Jacqui, with your TAFE hat on, it's kind of a bit of a mixed picture in a way with construction industry skills and things, because you get on the one hand, you know, people like the Master Builders Associations, you know, looking for these stimulus effects because they say nobody's getting any work. But then with all of that happening, if it does all pick up, will there be sufficient, a big enough skilled workforce? And are you seeing much interest from people wanting to get into that sort of industry, or what are you seeing at TAFE in terms of what people want to do?
Well, we're seeing a range of things, Chris. We're seeing like there's certainly the support for businesses to maintain apprentices in employment has been really important. What we don't want to see is young people losing their opportunities for a future and perhaps losing them forever from a trade. So the important focus on vocational education is continuing and is important. We're seeing increased, so our enrolment and our inquiry levels for semester 2 of this year are at the same as last year, which I think is really encouraging. It shows that people are acknowledging that continuing to increase their skills is critical if they're going to play a role and have a future, a solid future in society. So all of those efforts we really welcome. I mean, the state government's been investing in TAFE a considerable amount. We've just finished the new health precinct in the Adelaide CBD, which is an excellent facility which focuses on health and personal care training. So those focus areas are going really well. Then in the regions, one of the benefits from our going digital, which we did, the team in TAFE SA, you know, turned on a dime and within 3 weeks had 95% close to of all training being delivered in a digital platform to maintain social distancing. And then a few weeks later, they spun back out and moved back into more face-to-face delivery. But one of the benefits we've seen from that work has been the acknowledgement there's an opportunity for TAFE to deliver a greater and broader range of programs in the regions that perhaps the population couldn't provide for full face-to-face teaching. But with us acknowledging the future and connecting to people through that digital platform, we're really seeing a broad range of opportunities open. And with the feedback from our students and prospective students is really encouraging. Many people think that the largest demographic that attend vocational education in TAFE is, you know, the 16 to 22-year-olds. In fact, it's not. It's people already in employment seeking to upskill. So 25 to 35 is our largest demographic. And when you're in employment, it's really important to have flexible delivery options. Not everybody can attend a campus. So if you can jump in and go online and do your program work and have connection to skilled lecturers through the phone or video conference or face-to-face, whatever works, then, you know, TAFE's uniquely set up to provide that. So we're looking at creating the opportunities there, both for our regional students and as well as our teaching staff to embrace technology and help provide those future skills.
Yeah, I've talked to schools quite a bit, and they certainly found that a lot of teachers are saying, they always had a bit of a digital component, but a lot of them suddenly had to pick up the skills, and they found that actually it's been really valuable, and so they're going to continue, having certainly a resource that will be much stronger than it ever was before.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't want to get away from the fact that a lot of vocational education has to be hands-on and have, actually doing practical skills with someone, coaching and mentoring you along the way. But that's not 100% of a training course. So we're really embracing that change and ensuring that, our South Australian students get every opportunity to do well.
And there are kind of emerging opportunities. Nick, you BankSA has got a strong involvement in data analysis, and you've got the presence down at Lot 14 with MRT and so on. Do you see that, space, cyber, data analysis, all of that continuing to grow?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I think Lot 14 is a fantastic thing for South Australia. The trajectory was already looking pretty good pre-COVID. I think what we'll find from Lot 14, but more broadly with technology, is just the pace of acceleration will just pick up. So I think there are many sort of industries within broadly defined technology, but whether it's cyber, whether it's space, etc. I mean, space will be a little bit challenged for the short term, but I think that ultimately we're going to see a real acceleration in the take up. I mean, the thing that has been talked about widely over the COVID-19, particularly in the heavy restriction period, is the use of technology, and therefore I think the platform that we've built in Lot 14 is fantastic. It was before, it is now, and it'll probably just be even better coming out of this with the acceleration of adoption of technology. We're right at the forefront of that, as you say, and the MIT Living Labs, we're going to be playing a role in helping South Australia get out of this with some insights that are going to be important for the government to think about. It's ultimately their capability. We're just facilitating it as BankSA, but ultimately it's their capability, their insights, which will be feeding into our recovery as well. So that's something that we're looking at right now.
Yeah, things like I think you get data from Dipti on transport and things like that. So that's going to be really interesting to see how things like public transport recover. Whether people do get back on the buses and the trams and things, or whether they need to be changed.
That's really a good point. I mean, there's a theory that MIT have, which is transport networks aren't just important for getting people from A to B, but it actually stimulates economic growth if you think about it very carefully, and go from potentially areas of, they call it inequality, where essentially services aren't as good as other areas. If you think about transport, not just from the social element, getting someone from A to B, or the jobs that are just for the building the roads, but longer term, think about stimulating growth by getting somebody who wouldn't have gone from place A to place B. Suddenly adds another dimension to the way that we should be looking at infrastructure and transport networks in South Australia. So, that's one idea that MIT are bringing to the table. They're very smart people, and we're certainly listening to them, and then the analysis and the data feeds into that, and hopefully we can get some pretty interesting insights and strategies from it.
And Ollie, obviously the private sector, is the real job creator, driver of the economy. You can't rely on the government to do that itself. It can support private sector, but what do you see as the role of the private sector in growing this, and particularly things like innovation, with supporting more research and development, coming up with new ways of doing things?
For sure, yeah. Now is definitely not the time for people to be risk adverse. I think the private sector needs to continue to develop and start opening new venues in our cases, and continue to kind of push and develop. I mean, we've had all this time to sit back and come up with new ideas and think about the models that we've had prior to COVID and how we can shift them and change. So I think with the helps of the banks as well. That's a huge part of the private sector actually being able to develop. But yeah, I think people need to kind of take risks and spend a little bit and try and develop in these sort of slower periods.
So you were saying earlier that you are looking at another venue. So you're obviously taking a risk yourselves. So.
Yeah, for sure. I think in the kind of riskier times, there's always an opportunity for great reward. And even in the last week, just kind of seeing the return to hospitality definitely fills us with confidence. And I mean, South Australia is in a great position as sort of a safe state to be in. But I think with domestic tourism, we're poised to be in a pretty good position. We have such amazing regions and great food and wine. So I sort of think SA could really take advantage of this period as a safe state to travel and has so much to offer. So we're hoping that we can sort of get off a little bit off the back of that and get some of that sort of domestic tourism through our venues, as well as the return for locals back to sort of suburban high streets too. So I think suburbs are a great option for local, and then hopefully the regions for domestic tourism.
Can you tell us any more about the venue yet, or is that still under negotiation?
Yeah, still under negotiation at the moment. So yeah, we're still working on it, but it'll be I reckon it's going to be a ripper. It'll be a good one. I'll buy you a beer.
well, I'm a beer drinker rather than a wine drinker. So.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and South Australia is known for its wine, but the beer is pretty damn good too. So.
Yeah, for sure.
And I suppose the bubbles opening up will be useful. So, like, if we get the certainly bubble to other states, and then hopefully New Zealand. We used to have flights to New Zealand. They're one of the ones that are on hold at the moment. But New Zealand's doing pretty well. So if we can open that up, that'd be good.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think it's a real opportunity, Chris, for the education sector as well, to off the back of how well South Australia's done, to really encourage the international students back to Australia and South Australia primarily. You look at it provides, if you're a parent looking at where to send your child, you're looking at potential health risk, but you'd also be looking at overall security risk. And I think Australia has a great reputation for providing a really safe and welcoming community for students to study, because education is a huge export industry for Australia and for SA. So I think everything we're doing in terms of opening up the state and navigating our way through the pandemic really does open up that opportunity. And I know a lot of the higher education sectors are looking to leverage from that.
Yeah, they are looking at a tough next year in terms of numbers. But what more could be done in terms of policies and marketing and so on to grow that, and particularly to emphasise South Australia's strength as a safe place? I mean, I know I've got kids who university age, and I imagine myself sitting in India or China or somewhere and wanting to send them overseas, and South Australia would be ideal, because excellent universities and as you say, safe and also affordable place to be.
Indeed it is. I think it's about, there's some great work that comes out of Study Adelaide that helps promote South Australia as a unique destination amongst Australian universities for people to study. I also think the visa settings that have been established for South Australia also help that, to enable people to work for an extended period of time post their university qualification. So I think we're well set and well placed for that. I think we'll see a real step up in terms of marketing and opportunity from Study Adelaide and the higher education sector to take advantage of that opportunity. Because I'm with you, Chris. Where would you send your child? You'd send them somewhere safe, somewhere it's reasonable, and where there's really great quality education. And South Australia ticks all those boxes. And it's got a great restaurant entertainment scene too. Hey, Ollie?
Yeah, that's right. I actually have a quick question for you on that as well, Jill. You say we want to kind of encourage international students back here, and just even in the city, you can see how much that's affected the businesses just without having them here. From our point of view, we have a lot of students work for us. They're limited to 20 hours a week of work. Do you think that's something that could be reviewed just to try and make it easier for them to actually live and work here? Because 20 hours casual wages is not very much.
No, indeed. I think you're right, Ollie. I think that could potentially be something we look at, something we could look at on a state basis. You do want to be sure, though, that they are actually getting an education, and managing that is important. But, you know, we all know people study differently. And, you know, I remember going through uni and working a little bit more than 20 hours a week. So, yeah, I think it'd certainly be an opportunity to look at those settings as well.
Mm. And Jacqui, are there any other levers that, you know, as Ollie was saying earlier, this is a time when you can take risks. You know, the government, it's got a lot of pressure on its on the Treasury numbers, but there are other kind of policy levers and things that a government can do. You were talking earlier about, you know, kind of red tape and regulation and all of those sort of things. Government's got a very tricky role because it's got to ensure things are done properly and safely and appropriately and protect, you know, the environment and public health and all those sort of things. But sometimes the screws on a bit too tight in there. What sort of levers could government pull to now where it is a time you can take risks and open things up a bit?
You can, and I think you can achieve both, Chris. I think you can have solid legislation that ensures good engagement with the community and ensures that, you know, the right decisions are being made. But I also think there's a really large opportunity for innovation in the government sector to really work more efficiently, connect different departments to ensure that there's a more seamless interaction between someone trying to get a project off the ground and government, both at federal and state level. I know within, you know, TAFE, we're really trying to encourage our team to work to be more innovative and more productive. And I think efforts there, both on the state and federal government level, to encourage innovation and encourage, you know, some productivity efforts, I think would be really important. I was listening to Landline the other day, and they were doing a comparison of the cost of, you know, stock clearances and inspections for cattle, and in Australia it's 4 times higher the cost than it is in the US. And that type of inefficiency doesn't help anyone. I'm all for voting, you know, buying local, and I think what has to be partnered with that is, you know, local producers in Australia should focus on being innovative and productive so that we can compete not just on quality but on price.
And productivity improves the health of the business, and then perhaps helps them employ more people. So, Nick, we've had some pretty bad job numbers over the last little while. What are you looking forward? What do you see in terms of those numbers, but also the what sectors do you think, if I was a young person looking for a career, what are the kind of sectors that have got good job growth?
Well, my daughter's doing maths at uni. I'm encouraging her to think about cybersecurity or something like that, you know, which is aligned to that type of course. But I mean, something in the space we talked about lot 14, and we talk about it a lot. But there are many industries in that location, whether it be space, whether it be AI. Cyber data, or et cetera, et cetera. There's definitely a lot of opportunity there. But there's some other things that are going to come out of this that I think is going to be pretty interesting. So, as I said earlier, you know, the boards of corporates across Australia will be thinking differently about working from home, how people adapt post-COVID. And I think South Australia is really well placed to sort of be a net sort of beneficiary of that. I know within BankSA and the broader Westpac group, we've added quite a number of roles, hundreds of jobs in recent times, because we've got agility here to move quickly. We've got obviously space and we've got a relatively low cost environment. So we're putting roles on here in South Australia. And I think, you know, so I think there's some opportunity in this. Traditionally, our numbers have been, you know, sort of a little off the pace in recent times, but I have some real opportunity, real sort of I guess positive outlook on what can happen if we really think through the opportunities. I don't think we're going to be the same as before in the sense of we won't just default straight back to where we were. I think fundamentally many industries are going to look differently at their businesses. in our industry, the Reserve Bank only spoke a couple of days ago. Checks are probably a thing of the past. Cash usage is starting to really change. So we're automatically having to think about our business. What does that mean? But more broadly, where are the opportunities? And I certainly think there's plenty out there, Chris. And which, if we're smart, hopefully we can find that our jobs numbers rebounds quickly. It won't be in a hurry, but it'll sort of Q4 into first quarter of next year. Hopefully things start to get back to normal. From a growth perspective, we are thinking there'll be we're saying around 4% growth for the year of 2021. The RBA is saying about 6%. So call it 4 to 5. That's not too bad next year, which should provide the environment for more jobs. So we've got the fingers crossed anyway.
Over the last little while in South Australia, the biggest growth's been in personal services, aged care, healthcare, that sort of thing. Do you think that's something we probably overlook, particularly the aging population? So not just talking about jobs in nursing homes and sort of nursing style frail aged care, but a lot of opportunities perhaps in an older demographic, and that may be something like Ollie's business. I mean, people think about restaurants, mostly restaurants and pubs, sort of young people going in, but in fact people in their 60s have got the time and the money to be there. So is that something you would like to see develop more?
Not sure if that's a question for me or
me
Ollie,
I
do think it's a massive opportunity. There's a mega trend there that's not going to change for any time soon. So I think we'd do well to. I think we've done pretty well, broadly defined in the health industry. There are many elements to that, but I think we've done extremely well in recent times. But I do think it's going to continue to accelerate. The demand is going to be there. We need to make sure we've got innovative new goods and services to meet that demand. I'll let Ollie talk about on the restaurant side of it.
Yeah, most definitely. It's a very interesting one. I think you'll find a lot of venues sort of aim and point themselves towards that kind of younger demographic, but the realistic part of it is that your regulars tend to be older and they tend to be more loyal. They don't kind of shift around to the next best thing. So our best customers and most regular and higher spending customers are definitely of the older demographic, and we see a lot of that in Prospect. It's just their local venue, so they pop down, and they were the ones that supported us the most during COVID as well. So I think maybe a shift towards some more venues that focus towards them would be amazing, and I think that suburbs are probably the best demographic for that.
Now, coming out of the recovery, for it to actually happen, it's going to require consumers to get out and spend, whether it be home renovations or restaurant meals or new fridges and washing machines, whatever it is. So, but people have been scared. They've it's been a really big shock. A lot of people have lost their jobs. People are going to be reluctant to spend. How do you think we sort of break that that barrier and encourage people to say, okay, look, the recovery is happening, and the more you spend, the better it'll be in many ways, without going completely overboard and letting people broke. But it is going to rely on people having a bit of confidence.
It's a delicate balance, Chris, isn't it? It's encouraging. I think if you're going to spend local, which is what Ollie was saying he's doing with his clubs and restaurants. The more we can support local producers, the better off we are, as well as supporting your local venues. And I think what we've seen over time is a big change in how people are spending habits. Services, streaming services, etc., are chewing up a large proportion of discretionary income. But we really need to refocus on spending. And if, certainly online shopping, we all do it. One day there may not be those retail centres that you come to rely on if we don't, consider how those local retailers are going to survive through this. So my view is get out and spend if you can, and if you're challenged, then make decisions about where that money goes so that it has the best impact on the local economy. And pick up BankSA's brochure on what was it, Buy Local campaign? I can't remember your slogan, Nick, but I've got the magazine.
Yeah, I agree with Jacqui. I think I'm a proud South Australian, but I've lived in other states and places, and I still feel like we're the most parochial place I've ever lived. So I think there's a real pent-up demand to really buy local and support local business. I think that's absolutely going to be there. But the risk, if there was one, is that this acceleration in online shopping probably net will go elsewhere than South Australia, unfortunately. So whether it's interstate or overseas, just how, we just don't have the weight of offering necessarily that other states and other overseas retail shops do. So I guess that's a risk to us, but I do think we have a proud parochial state that will want to do the right thing, get out to all these venues and other things, and I fully expect that to happen.
For sure, I agree with Jacqui on that one as well. And I guess one point that I'd probably like to say is that it's the responsibility of the venues and the business operators to push that as well, because if everyone's going to support local and the venues they're going to are buying the cheapest products on the shelf, it sort of loses its mark. So I think it's the responsibility of all kind of business owners to maybe forget about their bottom line for the next few months and think about how they can sort of prop up and support suppliers and other local businesses too.
Yeah, I think the sentiment is there. If you look at social media and things, people really do want to, buy local, support local. Australia generally, but particularly South Australia.
Yeah, and I think it's part of a broader social trend that consumers are looking for their dollar to have a broader impact than just the product that they buy. They want to know that there's a connection to a social outcome or to a benefit to the broader community. So the smart businesses have acknowledged that and are pivoting and ensuring that they're demonstrating that connection. And I think we'll see more of that as time goes on.
All right. Well, I think we're coming to the end of our time now. So anything else any of you would like to add, just as a last passing thought?
All good, Chris. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Hopefully that was of value to the listeners and watchers.
Well, we say thank you very much to Nick Reade, Chief Executive of BankSA and State General Manager, Westpac. Jacqui McGill, who's Chair of TAFE SA and runs her own consultancy and has many other hats. And Ollie Brown from the Big Easy Group. And thank you very much to all our viewers and listeners today. Future Adelaide is supported by the Department of Premier and Cabinet, but our guests today are all here voluntarily. And this is a bit of a series we're running as part of Future Adelaide. So we encourage you next week to tune in again via Facebook, either on advertiser.com.au or through the Future Adelaide site. And next week we'll be talking about the importance of infrastructure in South Australia, both the recovery and where we go from here. So thank you very much, everybody.